I served on a submarine that spent 48 hours chasing a ghost on other people's radars. I was the sonar man on watch for one of those long, slow missions where the ocean becomes a second life, spreadsheets of sound, smell of warm machinery, and men who have learned to turn fear into routine. We followed a radar contact that should never have been able to do what it did. It painted on the surface like any other blip. Then, without any splash or telltale trace, it slid down, straight through the sea, and vanished beneath us. This is the account. Technical, where the facts need to be technical. Human, where the hours hollowed us out. And careful, where the Navy asks us to be careful. I've footnoted the most important background facts, so the parts that sound impossible rest on something real. Read it with an ear for the mechanics, because the ocean is a rule book, and when rules break, you need to pay attention. We were attached to a NATO surface group running a complex anti-submarine exercise in the North Atlantic. Surface radar had picked an unknown return, slow-moving, intermittent, and stubborn. The frigates logged it as unknown, and the air assets painted the same dot at slightly different bearings. The ships wanted confirmation. We were ordered to shadow. Keep our distance, remain passive, and listen. Shadowing is a polite word for trailing from beneath. We run at periscope depth for optics when required, and ride low and invisible otherwise. Our boat was a late Cold War acoustic platform, not a fleet attack boat, but a listening specialist. We carried a bank of hydrophones and a LOFAR rack that turned the ocean into a readable tapestry of lines and tones. LOFAR was our candle in the dark. It turns low-frequency signatures into time-frequency images, so you can tell a propeller from a pump and a heartbeat from a hurricane. When a propeller sings, LOFAR shows it like a fingerprint. We sat where the noise floor is low and the stakes are high. The watch rotation is simple. 2 hours on, 4 hours off, and 8 hours of sleep if you're lucky. The sonar room is a cathedral of hums. The LOFAR display, bearings, beam-formed plots, and the long strip chart of raw hydrophone output. On day one, the contact was just a curiosity, a steady radar blip about 18 nautical miles from the frigate, range fluctuating slightly, bearing wandering like a lost boat. They asked us to shadow and report. The first oddity came from the surface reports. The radar blip's behavior did not match a merchant, and it certainly didn't match any air contact. It was a surface return, electromagnetic energy reflected off something at or near the surface, yet the ships that reported it saw nothing on the horizon. If radar sees something and optics don't, the first guesses are meteorological. Atmospheric ducting, unusual refractive layers that bend radar energy and create false or displaced images. Atmospheric ducting can make a radar see things far beyond normal range and can lift a return that isn't really where it appears. That phenomenon is real and documented. It can produce convincing false contacts under the right conditions. Our environmental profiler showed nothing extreme, normal sea state, conventional sound speed profile. If the charts and the meteorology were ordinary, then ducting seemed less likely, not impossible, but not a slam dunk explanation either. The surface group tightened formation. We stayed in our prescribed band of depth and shadowed at a discreet distance. If the thing was a trick of the weather, it would reveal itself eventually when the conditions changed. If it wasn't, we would try to hear it.
On LOFAR, day 2, we started to hear a low, coherent line, a narrow band tone, very low frequency, showing as a thin spectral line with small harmonics. It was faint, a seasonal murmur at first. Then it developed structure, a slow sweep downward, a Doppler signature that suggested vertical motion. LOFAR is precise. The relative harmonic spacing and the presence of discrete blade rate lines tell you if the source is rotating, like a propeller, and at what RPM. We had seen diesel generators and active slicers, and even whale songs that fool the novice, but this felt different. LOFAR turns the ocean's low notes into readable script, and this script spelled something coherent and deliberate. We ran a series of sanity checks. We isolated hydrophone channels, changed beamforming vectors, swapped gain stages, and ran redundancy checks on the LOFAR processors. The signature persisted on independent arrays. It was not a local electrical hum, nor a crosstalk artifact. This is the fisherman's trick of the modern subs. If the same thing appears on 2 or 3 separate sensors and on different receivers, it's real in the ocean, not just in the box. Back on the surface, their radar log and our LOFAR continued to mirror each other in a way that kept our analysts mute. The radar would show the blip, sometimes a small wobble. Then the LOFAR trace would develop a descending Doppler sweep at nearly the same time. Over the speakers, the frigate's tactical voice would say, "Contact descending," and the navigation lights kept the horizon blank. There was nothing to look at. The contact seemed to be moving downward in both electromagnetic and acoustic domains. Picture 2 independent sensors, electromagnetic and acoustic, both registering an object making the same vertical motion. On paper, this reduces the probability of simple sensor error. Radar reflections and sound propagation depend on different physics. Radar waves refract in and above the atmosphere. Sound bends through water layers and can ride channels such as the SOFR channel across great distances. The ocean's sound channel traps low-frequency energy, letting it travel thousands of kilometers with little loss, which is how SOSUS, the Cold War undersea listening network, worked. SOSUS arrays listened to quiet, low-frequency hums across the ocean and tracked Soviet submarines by those signatures. That system was real, and it changed naval strategy in the Cold War. If radar and LOFAR are both seeing the same thing, what are the reasonable possibilities? A coordinated system, a surface emitter plus an underwater mechanism producing matching acoustic signatures, maybe a buoyant emitter broadcasting a false radar target, while a towed vehicle or autonomous platform mimicked acoustics at depth. A radar mirror, an atmospheric phenomenon projecting an electromagnetic echo onto the water, while a real underwater mover, ship, submersible, moved beneath it. In other words, 2 different things coincidentally aligned. Something more exotic, a vehicle capable of fast, controlled submergence that somehow retained a radar cross-section as it descended, or a natural phenomenon we do not yet understand that couples surface electromagnetic reflection to deep acoustic motion. We could test river hypotheses. We widened the search area and asked the surface group to run an active radar sweep with controlled parameters, but they did, but the radar contact merely rearranged itself. We issued a low-power interrogatory ping, not the kind of pulse that screams tactical contact, but a short, active chirp meant only to probe. The ping returned as a diffuse smear, then a metallic-sounding whisper. The LOFAR trace spiked, and the descending sweep sharply terminated. It looked as if the object, or whatever was producing the signature, had reacted. This is where the hair on your neck starts to matter more than any chart. The ship that reacts to being probed is not a random mirage. It behaves like intelligence, or like a living system that senses and withdraws. You ask then, could this be the Soviets testing a deep submersible or an advanced weapon? In 1960, Trieste proved humans could reach the deepest trenches. Later, experimental submersibles pushed the envelope further. Trieste's dive to Challenger Deep was historic. It demonstrated it was possible to descend into immense pressure with the right engineering. That history matters because it sets a baseline. We know humans have engineered vehicles to extreme depth. Whether anyone militarized similar capabilities in secret remains a subject for speculation, but the precedent is important. The contact continued to descend. The LOFAR Doppler line grew steeper. Frequency shifted like a siren that pitched down as it moved away, a direct acoustic analog of descent. Bearings tightened. We tried to intercept at silent drift to preserve our listening, rolling the array and adjusting our depth so our most sensitive listening plane lined up with the incoming sound. Even when we adjusted platform geometry to maximize signal-to-noise, nothing in the optical domain showed. The periscope surveys were blank. Night vision showed only ink and stars. If a craft had been able to reduce its surface footprint while maintaining a radar cross-section, or if the radar return was generated remotely, we had no visual confirmation. We debated physics in the way sailors do, with humor and with the kind of cautious, almost private profanity that insists on sanity. We tested every mechanistic explanation. Could a submerged platform be surrounded by a rising gas bubble, or a field that altered the sea-air interface sufficiently to project radar energy downward? Could electromagnetic energy be guided by atmospheric ducts and then couple into the water at the same point as an acoustic source? The first is engineering speculation bordering on science fiction. The second is within the realm of known atmospheric electromagnetic interactions, but coupling it tightly and repeatedly to an underwater target is not a usual event.
There is one piece of acoustic physics you must keep in mind. Low-frequency waves bend and can be trapped by the sound speed profile. Low-frequency mechanical sources are efficient at sending energy far away. LOFAR was invented to read those signals by fixed arrays and sonobuoys. It picks up blade rates, tones, and harmonic structure. When you see a steady harmonic set on LOFAR, you start to think propellers. When you see an abrupt, clean, vertical sweep, you start thinking of controlled depth motion. Those instruments don't lie, but they need interpretation layered on top of a model of the ocean. On the second night, the correlation snapped into a single, horrid clarity. The radar blip, for reasons we never could definitively say, narrowed and then collapsed in range, descending at a rate that the LOFAR showed as a coherent vertical Doppler line. The radar operator voiced it with a clipped, formal tone. Target descending at bearing 018, range collapsing, loss of surface contact imminent. And then it was gone, vanished. Not faded, not smeared, gone. Both sensors severed their readings in the same heartbeat. The LOFAR swept down to a null, and the radar returned to background. The ships on the net called it a mirage, and some officers began using the word ducting. Others called it a liaison, a rebroadcast of an old signature. We filed reports. We archived LOFAR-grams. The experience left us with a handful of stubborn facts. Independent sensors showed vertical motion that culminated in disappearance. Active probing elicited a reaction. Environmental factors were not obviously abnormal, and the nearest support assets reported no visual or debris that would indicate a conventional surface or subsurface target. Long-delayed echoes exist in the electromagnetic domain. Radio operators have recorded signals returning after unusual delays for decades. Their origins are debated among physicists. One mechanism includes complex multi-hop reflections and scattering off ionospheric layers or distant reflectors. Another involves man-made relays accidentally retransmitting old signals. The occurrence of an anomalous electromagnetic echo supports the possibility of complex propagation paths, but it does not easily explain the acoustic coherence we observed in the water column. There are also tales in Cold War literature about SOSUS and other long-range acoustic systems picking up sounds that later proved natural in origin.
whale vocalizations mistaken for machinery until biology caught up. The ocean is full of surprises. Biology makes noises engineers sometimes cannot immediately explain. But our LOFAR harmonic structure was mechanical looking. It matched model signatures we had of rotating machinery more than any whale call. People ask why we didn't surface and get pictures. Protocol and political reality answer that. Surface too fast in an exercise, and you can trigger diplomatic incidents. Active emissions invite attention. Those in command who receive the initial data have to weigh national security, escalation risk, and the value of information. In our case, the instruction from higher command after the event was to secure the data, restrict discussion, and return for debrief. The classified file was encoded and stored. In civilian language, someone above us decided containment of information mattered more than public curiosity. After we returned to port, analysts cross-checked our LOFAR-grams and split the candidate hypotheses into 3 plausible categories: environmental mirage with incidental acoustic signature, coordinated deception, an emitter plus a submerged vehicle, or an experimental submersible capable of rapid submergence with some mechanism to preserve or simulate a radar cross-section during descent. None fit perfectly. The ocean presented a case that created more questions than answers. What stays with me beyond the charts and the admonitions to be quiet is the way the ship behaved when the contact descended. The crew moved in a way I remember as if we had all heard a bell. Men who had been brash with each other in port became smaller. The ship's humor folded into silence. Shadowing a thing and losing it beneath your keel is a small personal earthquake. Your charts tell you you tracked something, and then the world reasserts its mystery by taking it away. That absence is louder than any immediate alarm. Can modern science explain the whole scenario? Parts of it, yes. LOFAR explains the acoustic traces. Radar physics explains ducting. Oceanography gives models for sound propagation. The specific combination of a radar trace that narrows and then appears to descend in concert with an acoustic Doppler signature is not commonly documented in open literature. It sits in the marginal region where atmospheric physics, electromagnetic propagation, and hydrodynamics could combine, or where human technology could produce a coordinated effect.
If you ask me what I think now, years later, after the secrecy and the forgetfulness, I'll tell you this. Every sensor is a window, and every window has a blind spot. We were looking through multiple windows that night and saw a coherent event across them. The simplest explanation that squares the most facts is not always the right one, but it is usually the best place to begin. Something with the capacity to present a surface signature and to produce or coordinate a deep acoustic signature was in the area, and it withdrew when probed. Whether that something was a clandestine human system, a rare atmospheric and oceanic coupling, or something else that will make technologists uncomfortable, it remains, for me and for the men who watched the graphs, an unresolved piece of the ocean. We filed our reports, the Navy archived them. We went back to sea on other missions, but sometimes at night I open the drawer where they keep the debriefs and look at the LOFAR-gram, at that clean descending sweep, and I can feel the old watch tension resurface like a wave. Modern research continues to make the ocean more legible. Machine learning denoising of LOFAR-grams, improved environmental modeling, and better integration between electromagnetic and acoustic observations, all aim to reduce the kind of mystery we faced. LOFAR analysis has improved with new denoising techniques and automated classifiers, which help separate biological, geological, and man-made sources. The science is advancing,
And with better instruments, some ghosts become less opaque. That's hope and the practical answer. But the ocean will always keep corners. It has more volume than our current curiosity can fill. We remember that night because it told us the sea still has things to hide and things to give back on its own terms. If you listen long enough, you will hear the chorus of the known and the murmur of the unknown. The trick is to keep your instruments honest, train your ear to the patterns, and accept that sometimes the chart and the fact do not quite meet. If you want the technical appendix I used, the LOFAR basics, the SOSUS context, atmospheric ducting primer, Trieste's precedent for deep dives, and the literature on long-delayed electromagnetic echoes, I can include the core sources so you can follow the facts yourself. For now, that descending line on the LOFAR-gram, the radar log that narrowed to nothing, and the captain's quiet order to secure the file are the things that live in my head. We shadowed a ghost, watched it vanish beneath us, and learned once more that the ocean keeps secrets the way a careful person keeps a private sorrow.